Percolating, and there we go. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning into the Banff Podcast. This is your host, Mike Lafferty. With me today, I have a very special guest, RPG legend, and I don't use that term lightly, Jeff D. How you doing, Jeff?
Hi guys.
Was that too much of an intro? I'm sorry.
Doing great. No, the whole fame thing just doesn't interest me. So I'm glad people like my work. That's what it's all about.
Sorry, I didn't mean to come on too strong there. Forgive me.
No, that's all right, man. I get that everybody else finds that interesting. So okay, fine. I'd rather just move on and talk about the things that I've done and not spend too much time on the fame thing.
Okay, no worries, no worries.
And I'm starting off with a complaint on your show, which is terrible. Sorry.
That's all good, man. We had worse beginnings. We really have.
I'm so famous. See, I can complain about things.
By the way, we made sure you're the only brown M&Ms in that bowl there. I hope that's
okay.
Good. And that's Italian seltzer water. I don't know if they told you that, but and also we have freaking co-host Christopher McLaughlin from Green Ronin and Greater Than Games. How you doing, Chris?
I'm great. I'm reminded about how grateful I was the day I realized that I am like the perfect level of famous, because it's like once a year I get to sign an autograph, but there aren't like people breaking into my house claiming to be like my real wife. You know?
I haven't had that.
I think I once described it as I'm Klingon jail famous. If like I ever got put into Klingon jail at a con, there are enough people who knew who I am, I would have a realistic chance of being bailed out.
Well, hey, Jeff, just in case we might have a listener who only comes here to hear us ramble about comics and the occasional Rick and Morty reference, could you give our listeners your brief resume so they know who you are?
Oh, man. So I grew up in this little town about a half-hour drive south of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and was still in high school when D&D hit the college circuit and became a thing. And used to drive up to the original Dungeon Hobby Shop with my older brother back in the day. I remember picking up the first edition of Traveler, the original Traveler box set from the Dungeon Hobby Shop. Had illustrations that I did in Dragon Magazine #6. And from there, I did illustrations for TSR back in the early days, and also my best friend from high school and I created a superhero role-playing game called The Villains and Vigilantes. And then years passed, and I've done some comics, and now I'm publishing games. I've got two different companies. Villains and Vigilantes is back, and that's one of the things. And I've also got another company that publishes a bunch of other stuff that I've done, and yeah.
Well, that must
you can tell I'm terrible at the self-promotion thing.
Well, what is this other stuff that sounds kind of mysterious?
Well, you had me on to talk about Cave Master at one point.
Oh yeah, Cave Master,
right?
That was great.
So that's one. It's a caveman. Just quickly, caveman role-playing game.
Mm-hmm.
It's if cavemen had thought of how to do role-playing games, this is how they could have done it. And you play a role-playing game. It's not you laugh because cavemen are funny, but it's kind of not designed to be a humorous caveman game. It's like a realistic caveman game. And also, one of the things I'm very proud of that isn't Villains and Vigilantes is we got the license to do a new game set in M.A.R. Barker's world of Tecumel. Do you guys remember Empire of the Petal Throne from TSR?
Oh, wow.
1976?
Yeah.
So wow. Baythorm is the new Tecumel game. And I've been a Tecumel fan since I was just a wee lad. In fact, that older brother I mentioned, when he went off to college and took all of our gaming stuff with him, except for Empire of the Petal Throne, that was the game that I introduced to my high school friends and where I cut my teeth as a GM. It's on EBT. Villains and Vigilantes. When Jack Herman and I first thought, we had an argument who would win in a fight, Spider-Man or the Human Torch, we pulled out Empire of the Petal Throne and wrote up EPP stats for those two characters and then had to make up their powers and won. But that was like the thing that gave us the idea, hey, if we just keep going and writing up descriptions of how powers work, eventually this could be a game. Are you allowed to make role-playing games about superheroes? So that's where that all came from. So yeah, Baythorm is a new thing. It's been very, very well received. Oh my gosh, what else? I got a Patreon if people like my art.
There you go.
So I do art, I do game design.
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for you to mention. Is, I mean, if people have played D&D back in the day, they've seen your art in Deities and Demigods and various other books.
Right, I was there back in the not the original D&D days, but like the red and blue box sets of D&D and AD&D during that period. Did a lot of illustrations in those rule books and also in modules.
Okay.
And Top Secret and Gamma World and those things from that era.
Do you have a favorite old school game from back in the day?
Favorite old school? Oh, wow. Actually, I think my favorite old school game is it would be RuneQuest. Or more specifically, it's that Chaosium system I quite like. Their game Stormbringer, their first Elric game using their what they later called the basic role-playing system. That's one of the elder games that I really like a lot.
Cool. Well,
and you can see this in my design work. I mean, Villains and Vigilantes, the very first thing I did is kind of on a D&D model. With it doesn't have classes because it's superheroes and they're all the same, but it has levels and experience points that way, and a D20 roll to hit and all that stuff. But everything since then that I've done is much more skill-based, more freewheeling. Your characters, whatever mix of things you want to give them, kind of thing.
Okay, we don't have to dive into it because I suspect it's a painful memory. But suffice to say, it's been a saga.
Yeah,
this, newest version of V&V out.
Yeah, I'll just go quickly through the story. Back in 2010, Jack Herman and I came to believe that the publishing rights to our superhero role-playing game should have reverted to us, and so we re-released it. Through Fantasy Games Unlimited, we had done an original edition of Villains and Vigilantes, and then a revised edition that was the playable one. And in 2010, we came out with V&V 2.1, which is basically revised V&V with all new art and some cleanup and a little bit of additional material. And then we got involved in a whole lawsuit thing. So that went on for 6 years. Long story short, we are now the sole publishers of all editions of Villains and Vigilantes that have been. And we launched a Kickstarter for the 3rd edition because, it's been 35 years since revised. So we launched that, and we raised a bunch of money, and we've just now finished shipping. Well, we finished ordering the books for all of our backers, and the game is currently available on RPG Now. The 3rd edition of Villains Vigilantes has its own name also. It's V&V 3.0, but also it's Mighty Protectors, because we can own the trademark on
that. Okay. So how have the rules changed?
Okay. So I'll assume that the listeners that care have played old versions of Villains and Vigilantes. The big difference is, Villains and Vigilantes was, Dungeons and Dragons inspired. It was random character generation. Super old school D&D inspired. Random character generation. You randomly rolled for what abilities your character was going to get. Though the way we made that make sense is there's an editing pass, right? You actually roll up 1 or 2 more powers than you're going to get to keep, and you throw out the ones that don't fit your concept. At least that's the idea. And it was, stats on a roughly 3 to 18 scale for normal humans, but for superheroes, of course, it went crazily higher than that. And D20 rolled to hit a bunch of recognizable things. But all of our abilities in in earlier editions of Villains of Vigilante, a very specific thing. If you had a power blast, it did a set die roll of damage, and all the rules about how the power blast worked were set in stone, because it wasn't there was no construction element to it. It was all the abilities were just there, and the question was, which ones did you have? Well, to make that a little more flexible, we told game masters in revised V&V all along that if you want to play fast and loose with this stuff and make different abilities work different ways, often to balance characters, because not all the abilities were equally good, so you could get a bad character by having a smaller number of abilities that were not very useful. And game masters were encouraged to, let that guy, also have like a melee weapon for free, or make the abilities that he's got do a little bit extra and stuff. And there was never really any guidance how to do that, other than, okay, you're the GM, do what you want. So the big difference in V&V 3 is that we've done two things. We've introduced all kinds of different strength levels for the different powers. So if you have a power blast, how much damage that it does is variable depending. And also we've introduced modifiers that you can put on abilities. That's an expansion of a thing that was always there. We always had the idea that you could make any ability a gadget. And then there were rules about, you didn't use your own personal power to make it go. It had charges and stuff like that. We expanded on that wildly. So now when you make a character, and we balanced all the powers against each other. So now when you make a character, you're not only throwing out the abilities that don't fit your concept, you're also able to shift emphasis around between abilities. So if you think you'd like your power blast to do a little more, but you don't need to teleport so far, you can weaken your teleportation and shift that some points from your teleport to your power blast. Now your power blast does more damage and you don't teleport as far. That's the big difference. Is there's all this these editing rules now for the abilities.
Okay, cool.
That was a short-winded way of saying it.
Well, what's the fan response been?
Sorry, guys. Very, very, very positive. There are a small number of naysayers who are not happy with the way that the lawsuit came out, who will scream and yell about anything they can possibly come up with. But other than those folks, we've had a very good response, and I think that's partly due to the fact that we've been working on this game, the new edition of the game, for like just the 6 years that it took to win the lawsuit. And all during that time, we've been very open about what we were changing and why. So if you go to our website, monkeyhousegames.com, and into the forum, you can see posts going back to 2010, 2011, laying out, okay, guys, here's the stuff we think could be improved about the earlier edition of the game, and here's the way we think we're going to approach that. And so the fans have gotten a lot of input on it, and yeah, they've come along for the ride, which I think is very, very helpful. We're not some monolithic corporation saying, we own your favorite game now, so we're going to change it the way we feel like.
Who are you thinking of when you say that, Jeff?
Nobody in particular.
There could be many examples that apply to that. All right. Are you guys planning a line of adventures, supplements, support, that kind of thing?
Yeah, a bunch of stuff was unlocked with the Kickstarter. So we've already, we're starting to work our way through those things. So we had already been publishing a line of what we call faux files for Villains and Vigilantes. It's a single character with their background and their full character sheet and all that stuff. A piece of color art for the character. So we've done one of those now, specifically with Mighty Protector's stats, and that's Dr. Killjoy and his kid sidekick Spoilsport. Killjoy is like a mad physician who was actually working with like Doctors Without Borders in this small African nation when there was a war and some superheroes came in and they had fights with the bad guys there, and innocent people were injured and this guy's mind snapped. So he goes around now with a scalpel cutting up superheroes. That's out, and also there's an Excel record sheet pack for the game, which does a lot of the math for you, so you can make your characters more quickly. And also, among the additions in the new game is a lot of the things that used to be just there's just a paragraph saying make something up, right? Like we had vehicles. Your character has a vehicle. Make something up. And now we have full, detailed, and I think really cool vehicle construction rules. So there's a vehicle construction sheet that comes with that, and a team record sheet. So now when your team gets experience, you can contribute it to a team pool and use that to build your base or your vehicle or your communicators or what have you. And also like a combat record sheet that just sort of condenses down all the combat stats to a easily accessible form to speed up combats. Those are out already. Next thing is going to be our first gang guide, which is the Roller Girls. It's like a girl roller skating villain thug group.
So roller derby supervillains.
Yeah, but they're not so much super. They're meant the gang guides are meant to be like, you've got your supervillain, but he needs some thugs, and he hires some thugs. So that will be coming out next. There's going to be a new introductory adventure called Situation Room that Jack Berman is writing on even as we speak. And we've got an adventure that was submitted for V&V that we're converting to Mighty Protectors called Market Forces. It's from Stefan Dedman, who's written a bunch of old and recent Villains and Vigilantes adventures.
Oh, geez, I remember you mentioning that last time you were on talking about V&V.
Yeah, we've had this thing. We didn't think there was any point to finishing it and releasing it just for old V&V once we knew we were doing the new one. So it's been in the works since then. Also, during the 6 years of the lawsuit, the major playtest campaign was run by my friend Brian Adams, who he did a World War II campaign. Well, he heavily documented his campaign and submitted it as a source book. So we've got this giant World War II book with like 100 characters and all the vehicles and stuff, and a timeline of when the bad guys did stuff during World War II and things. And it's huge. It's already illustrated, where all the stuff is like kind of coming down the pipe and will be coming out soon. And ref screen, and what else we got? So one thing that is different in the latest edition of V&V compared to previous things is, in the old days, we always thought of Villains and Vigilantes as a generic superhero role-playing game. We never intended for it to come with a specific setting. Instead, we figured you're gonna have to generate bad guys, so you're building your own world as you go. It may as well be your world, right? But we filled the game full of examples of stuff from our campaign because we needed examples, right? And as a result, for 35 years, people have just been clamoring to hear more about our original setting. Well, with Mighty Protectors, the Mighty Protectors multiverse is now front and center. You can play the game still in whatever setting you want, but included a bunch of background material and woven our world setting a bit into character generation in a non-invasive way. And
it's kind of par for the course in this industry that you get fans who are like, please give us a game world so we can heavily modify it.
Yeah, sure. And that's another thing. We made a point of saying, look, this is going to be a multiverse anyway, so your version of our universe is going to be your own.
Yeah.
And even if you don't want to do anything like our setting, like we've got a lot of fans who've been running 30, 40-year-long campaigns. Yeah. And they're not going to change their worlds just because they find out more about ours. But it's a multiverse, so just hop through the dimensional barrier and you can come visit.
Yeah.
Right? Well, one of the things that's different about the Mighty Protectors multiverse compared to, say, Marvel, is that people don't hate and fear mutants in particular in our universe, because it always struck Jack and I that it's silly that you meet one guy who fires laser beams from his eyes, and he's okay because he's just an alien from another planet, right? But you meet another guy who fires laser beams from his eyes, but you hate and fear him because he's a mutant. You know, there's nothing really fundamentally different there to justify that division. We've always felt, but we wanted something like that, and so in the Mighty Protectors multiverse, it's monsters, because there are going to be people who get abilities that just aren't going to make them socially acceptable, right? You know, if you have to eat human brains, you're gonna have to operate in secret. And so we've got a big source book coming called Abomination Realm, which is all about the monster subculture in the Mighty Protectors multiverse. It's very heavily inspired by Clive Barker's Nightbreed, if you recall, which actually was a comic book for a while too. It lasted like six issues or something. I love that concept, right? Like heroic monsters, but they're still scary and creep people out and stuff. But they're not. There's ones that aren't bad, even though they have to do bad things. So that's coming. And also, Stephen Dedman, who wrote a bunch of early Villains Vigilantes adventures, is back to write our space source book called Beyond This World. We allude to a lot of stuff about the Abomination Realm and stuff that's going on in space in the Mighty Protectors rulebook, but there's full source books for those things coming. So, very exciting. And that's just the stuff that was unlocked with the Kickstarter. There is more. There's more.
Okay. I've recently had a couple people ask me if I run my own publishing company, and I've had some people ask me, hey, you're going to be releasing content for V&V 3.0. And I said, I have no idea if there's a third-party license, but when I talk to Jeff D next time, I'll ask him.
Okay, so here's what we have. when we got into business and we figured V&V belongs to us, we had a simple licensing agreement, which was, hey, you want to do a thing, send us a copy so we can see that you're not like filling it full of the bad things. And let us give it a thumbs up, and then sure, go ahead and publish that. We don't need any money. As a result of the lawsuit, we do not control the Villains and Vigilantes trademark. Okay, so what we cannot let you do is publish a V&V 3 adventure. You can totally publish a Mighty Protectors adventure, though.
Okay.
You can use the same system. You just can't. You have to brand it differently.
You can't. We can't make it. I'll give you the right to say Villains and Vigilantes.
No. Okay. So semantics is very important. There was a lawsuit. I get that. So if a publisher, say listening to or broadcasting on this podcast, were interested in doing that, would they just drop an email, say, hey, this is the manuscript I'm thinking about converting over, or this is my idea, and you guys go from there, or is there some license footage, or how do you do it?
Start with that. Don't start writing it first. Just send us a one-page synopsis, and we'll tell you if there is any way in hell we would approve that. And probably the answer is probably yes, unless you're nuts. And and then go ahead and write the thing, submit it to us, and we'll give you some feedback and probably approve it, and then you can publish it.
If you ever do post formal guidelines, please include the unless you're nuts.
We haven't put the licensing agreement back up yet because we haven't yet gone through the legalese of modifying it to fit the current restrictions. But we'll be doing that, and we'll do that behind the scenes for you today if you need a thing like that today.
Okay. How do you feel about people converting older products from other systems over to your system? I mean, are you more interested in new content, or would you open to that as well?
That's really interesting. Like what?
I had a project I kickstarted last year written by Jason Tondro, who's freaking co-host here. He's an academic who specializes in pop culture, specifically American comic books, and it was called Supervillain Handbook, where he breaks down, a large handful of supervillain archetypes, gives specific examples from comics, and gives GM advice on how to use them in your game. And then we, Dr. Destroyer here, or that was a bad example. Sorry. Mr. X here is that's another character. Damn it. The Black Terror is an example of a certain kind of character. And here are stats. And we statted up for several systems, icons, mutants, and masterminds, etc. And we've had some people say, "Hey, you want to do this for V&V?"
No, we're totally cool with that. And back before the resolution of the lawsuit, when we could still do it, I think I seem to recall that we did license a couple of things like that.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah, totally.
All right. So if people are interested, they can just hit you up on Facebook or wherever they find you and have the conversation on a case-by-case basis, it sounds like.
That'll let a fire under our butts to follow through on the legalese on the agreement and get that posted publicly again.
Okay, cool. How have sales been? Man. I noticed you've been the top seller for, or at least in the top 10 for several weeks.
Yeah. You mean on RPG Now? Yeah. It's doing really remarkably well, considering it already did so well as a Kickstarter. There are apparently a lot of people who would wait and put in their money when it was done. So yeah.
Well, we're in the second phase of Kickstarter where people have gotten skeptical when they're waiting to actually buy the book the old-fashioned way. But
sure.
Well, cool.
So only the PDF is available to the general public right now. We are holding off on making physical books available until enough time has passed for the books we've ordered for our backers to arrive in their hands.
And that's a smart move because
and there will be an announcement coming soon, and I won't tell you the date. I'll just say it's an especially scary day when it's coming out. Ooh. A memorable, scary day.
November 7th?
Look at your calendar.
Okay, all right. Well, cool. So that's happening soon. We'll keep eyes out for that. And if people want to get it in print after all the backers get their copies, is it going to be at shelves of your local bookstore? Do you need to go RPG Now and order print on demand? What's the preferred method of doing it?
Lulu is our print on demand service.
Oh, okay, cool.
And I this is a thing I need to get past, but back in the day when RPG Now first attempted to do print on demand, I got burned really, really badly in that deal.
Oh, what happened?
Well, back around 2006, I think, I published a superhero role-playing game called Living Legends.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Which was a completely different system, but the same setting as Villains and Vigilantes, and which we hadn't branded yet, so that distinction was kind of lost on people. I was convinced at that point we would never get the rights back again, so published that thing, and was one of the people invited to participate in their attempt to do that. And about 500 copies of Living Legends got printed up, and I paid for that and never saw a penny back. So I'm grumpy about that to this day. I really need to get over it. I understand they've got their shit together and everything's fine now, but I'm really used to Lulu now, so it's just the drag of having to shift gears.
Yeah, well, I've had good luck myself with RPG Now, but I understand being trepidatious because that's a lot of money to lose, it sounds like.
Yeah, and on the distribution front, we're always pursuing options, but every time we've sat down with distributors and explained to them that we're a tiny little company, they've basically said, then you probably shouldn't try to do that.
Well, at least they're being honest. Did you try any Press Revolution, or?
We're looking into various options.
Okay, cool. Fair enough. Okay, well, this is very exciting news. A lot of releases coming out. Possibility of a third party products. Talk to you directly about that.
Yeah. So let me tell you more about Mighty Protectors, because I'm so excited. Other changes from old V&V. Villains Vigilantes used to have a D&D-ish kind of combat table in the sense that your chance to hit was found on a matrix of cross-indexing a couple of numbers, right? In D&D, it's like, what is it, your level and their armor class. In Villains Vigilantes, it was what attack type are you using, and what is the best defense type they've got against it. So it was a D&D-ish kind of armor makes it hard to hit you kind of thing. And in Mighty Protectors, we have gotten rid of that matrix, which I know a lot of people loved, but combat really does go way faster now, since you don't have to look up things in a giant matrix. Now we've distilled all of the attack and damage types down to 5 things. There's kinetic, energy, entropy, biochemical, and psychic. And abilities that ought to make it so you take less damage from a thing actually do that now. They soak up a number of points of damage from one or more of those damage types. And then things that should make it harder for you to be hit, like you're super dodgy, or it's hard to tell where you are and stuff. Those actually increase your defense, which makes it hard to hit you.
I hope the power is actually called Super Dodgy in the book, because that would be kind of awesome.
It's not.
Okay.
It's not. So that's different now.
Can we change that, or is it too late?
I'm sorry? No, we can't change it.
Okay.
We're not going to change it. We're not going to change it just for you. You should have contacted us while we were doing the Kickstarter. We could have put in a special level for you. And then also, Villains Vigilantes used to be experience levels like D&D, and we've gotten rid of that, or rather, experience levels are now an ability, just like a power blast, or being gigantic, or being teleporting, or being invisible. So when you make your character, you could start with one of your abilities being you're really experienced, and it gives you your across the board bonuses to accuracy and damage and like skill checks and stuff. So in old editions of V&V, the only way to be Batman would have been roll up hardly any abilities and have them only be some wimpy gadgets, and then play that character for long enough that they became about 20th level. Now you can make a character like that out of the box, because experience levels are just an ability like anything else, which means that advancement is not by experience levels anymore. It's by the same sort of points that we use to rate your strength in all of these various abilities. And they're roughly comparable to 1 attribute point, right? So an experience point is a thing you could spend to get another point of strength or another point of agility, or you save up enough of them and you can boost the damage of your power blast or the distance of your teleport, or your experience levels.
Okay, so was that done for more genre emulation, or just to kind of make it easier to get the character you want out of the box?
The experience level thing, really was a fix that needed to be made, because you couldn't really make Batman, right?
And everyone wants to be Batman at some point, so yeah.
A lot of people want to be a Batman or something like him. So that was a fix that was really necessary for that. And once we decided we were going to rate all abilities in increments that are represented by some points, it was silly not to move the advancement over to that same scheme. We were concerned. I mean, in old time V&V, you never really got to affect your abilities directly like that with character advancement, except in certain ways, right? Like every time you went up an experience level, you got an attribute point you could assign, so you could slowly build up your attribute scores. And there were certain superpowers that every time you went up a level, they got better. And there was also inventing was a thing that you could do. And we actually, the very first thing we did when we started to write Mighty Protectors is we analyzed exactly how fast are characters advancing, exactly what all do you get when you go up an experience level, and how can we distribute that as like, okay, that represents this much award that we, when we give it to you, you can spend it. in these increments, and that's how we arrived at the system that we've got and the increments that we've got. So we were very concerned that if we started letting people spend points directly on their abilities, we'd get crazy, out of control characters. But that's not what happens. What happens is people tend to spread them around and sort of improve across the board slowly in different areas in order to, you got to shore up your defenses as the campaign progresses, because you're fighting tougher and tougher bad guys. But you also need to shore up your attacks because you're fighting tougher and tougher bad guys. Oh, and you better shore up your accuracy because tougher and tougher. Oh, and also your ability to dodge, right? So, and oh gosh, you better develop those special goggles that will let you see invisible things, because, you know what I mean? So, so it's worked great, and in fact, it covers the other end of the scale, right? The Hulk. Another thing that bothered me about my own game in the past is the Hulk does not seem like a character who, in Hulk #1, he's a first level Incredible Hulk, and in Hulk number 250, he's a 20th level Hulk. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't really have that kind of linear. Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea that experience levels should be the only way that he could get better is silly. So now what you find in the new game is characters sort of improve, not necessarily explicitly in experience levels, but kind of slowly across the board. And if you want to improve your character by just making him better at the things that he does, go ahead and buy those experience levels. But if you want to just get stronger and stronger and stronger, buy those strength points.
Or if you go into the 90s for time travel, you need to buy some more pouches. So
sure.
That was my sad attempt at humor. Sorry, but speaking of the Iron Age, you started writing your setting. I mean, back in the, sounds like you started, creating this world, back in the early days of gaming, which we could call what, late Bronze Age in terms of comics.
Yes. Okay.
Have you had to go back and revise as comics have changed, or have you kind of sort of stayed true to the original tone you had, or?
That's a really interesting question. And people will also ask me, what is V&V more like? Is it more like Marvel, or is it more like DC? And the answer to that, I have to answer that first question first for context. I'm a Marvel guy and Jack's a DC guy, so V&V is kind of like straddling those two things. We didn't really have to change. I mean, even the new Villains Vigilantes game is still old-timey comics, superhero comics, in the sense that death is not a particularly major issue. The V&V combat system is a thing that allows characters to soak up damage on their power score to prevent it from getting to their hit points, so they don't take that much physical injury. And as a result, death isn't really a problem. And that's just game mechanics enforcing the way superhero comics used to be. And we're still in that era in that sense. But back when I did Living Legends, Jack was going to write the world setting material for Living Legends. In fact, he got pretty far into it. But that was in the depths of, the dark era of comics, the post-Watchmen kind of, everybody wants to be Wolverine and kill things and stuff. And so he started writing a variant of our setting that was very dark and nasty, and I said, dude, I don't want to go there. So Living Legends came out without that particular background stuff. Okay. And when we sat down to do Mighty Protectors, Jack was back on board. He agreed with me that we wanted to get back to our roots and show a modern day version of the same sort of setting we had all along.
I think that's probably a smart move, because I'm guessing you guys are kind of sort of sharing a lot of crossover with the old school Revolution guys. There's a very strong love for nostalgia these days.
Yeah. Yes, that's totally true. And it's, I remember periods in time when nostalgia had a bad name, and now for some reason it's treated with a lot more respect. who can understand these things? I don't know, but it's convenient. I'll say that.
I blame the baby boomers, but Chris, do you have an opinion on that?
I guess that's where the money is.
Yeah.
Right. That's where the money's coming from is older folks.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because you were talking about doing this Iron Age supplement, and I was thinking of the great irony that when it came time for us to do that era in Mutants and Masterminds, we turned out what I thought was a pretty fair book from two guys who are absolutely not fans of that era at all. Yeah. And it just occurs to me that, I mean, there were a lot of comics sold during that period, but it's almost like where are the people that were actually fans of that era? Were they just in and out of the hobby during that 10-year period?
I kind of hope that was never actually more than a fad and a branch of the genre rather than taking over the whole thing. Really, it was a very popular branch for a while.
Oh, yeah.
But the comics have kind of sort of moved back in the direction of the way they used to be in terms of those kinds of things, right? It's not all about killing and stuff. It's sort of it's weird. I mean, it's led us to things like the Arrow TV show, where they bring him in as a guy who like murders people. And now, what are they, 5, 6 seasons in, and they're finally doing their thing where he's kind of like parting company with killing and feeling bad about what he did. I don't know, man. It's weird. It's weird.
Well, it's the nature of the genre, I think, is you get a bigger audience. It's kind of what happened with superhero comics. At some point there's, market and, societal pressure to, hey, quit killing all those guys. And,
Yeah.
And, I don't know, was there a whole, I mean, I remember the last great comic outcry I remember was like very early in that period when, the professionally offended class on the right picked up a copy of Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen. And couldn't, and couldn't, and they were like, "What happened to Adam West?"
He's not the mayor on Family Guy, but yeah.
I mean, it just seems to me that like most of the outcries that you hear today are, they're as predictable as they are manufactured.
Yeah. So one of the things that really bugged me in comics more recently is, when Marvel decided we're going to be going into movies. This is my take on it. Maybe I'm reading a lot into what they did, but when Marvel decided we're going to be doing all these movie things, so we have to make superheroes acceptable to the general public. So one of the things we have to address is, how can it be legal for these people to be running around in tights, firing energy blasts and beating up criminals? So our answer is it's not. That drove me crazy. To me, the whole superhero genre only works. I mean, the traditional superhero genre only works when it's when it has the legacy of decades and decades of superheroes already existing and society already having figured out how it is that they can exist and do their thing, and have that behind you. And bringing it up now was I just think, a huge mistake.
So you weren't a fan of Civil War?
No. I mean, there were well-written books, some of them, and well-drawn, some of them. I mean, that's fine. But and I watched the Arrow TV show when he was going around shooting and killing people. Right? I can accept those variations. But if you're one of the two major companies that are the home of the genre, I think they really screwed up their genre. When they went back and did Captain America, right, the Captain America movie, that should have been the place where they established that, wow, there's actually a tradition of this going back really far, and when you watch our movies, you're seeing a world where this is accepted. And they still haven't really done that.
Well, you know, there's
for God's sake, you watch the damn Daredevil show, right? And they still have people on the street making fun of the fact that he's in a costume. Like, shut up! Those people have now lived in a world for how long has it been since?
Like 12 years.
Yeah, for 12 years they've lived in a world full of, like, you know, Thor flying through the air and Captain America jumping around and stuff. Why do they still have those people? And why are they not the people being laughed at?
It's kind of the guy
with a problem with costumes. Huh?
Well, I tell you how I kind of look at it. And again, I'm not saying you're wrong. I believe me, I love good old fashioned superhero universes as much as anybody else. But if you look at the real world today, you know, we live in a world where, you know, essentially all of human knowledge is available at the click of a mouse for a nominal fee. You know, we've cured diseases that, you know, slayed our ancestors in droves, and you know, and there are people that are obsessed with Kardashians. You know, I mean, it just seems like our society's capacity to miss the wonders around it, or even mock them or take them for granted, seems to be bottomless.
Well, that could just be human nature, Chris.
Yeah,
that's a good point. But there's certainly a place for people who don't like superheroes as characters in the world where there are superheroes.
You got to have your J. Jonah Jameson.
J. Jonah Jameson, yeah.
But why does it always have to be like the main characters in these shows, right? That are the representatives of that. You know, I mean, that when the Thing would walk down Yancey Street or whatever, and idiots would throw bottles at him because he's weird looking. You know, that's where those people live.
Yeah.
So anyway, with Mighty Protectors, you will get a setting where, you know, our history goes back to our original superheroes in World War I, and we've dealt with the legality issue. There's a whole section on the way that the government works with superheroes, and we addressed that question by saying, well, yeah, they found a way, and here's what it is. Not yeah, no, you can only do that if you go under the government's purview.
Yeah, I was reading your preview and you had I saw a section about superhero licenses.
Yeah, and when we say superhero licenses, it's a totally non-invasive thing. All that the government really cares about is they don't want to develop a working relationship with, like, you know, Dr. Pine Tree. Yeah, I just made up a stupid name. And then have some villain who can change his appearance show up and jerk him around pretending to be Dr. Pine Tree, right? The licensing is totally an identification thing, so the authorities know that it's really you, and that's almost all there is to it. And so they don't even have to know precisely what your abilities do. They just, to get your license, you need to establish that you can do this superheroing thing and not cause more disasters than you solve.
That's, you know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of one of my favorite parts of the Venture Brothers is the continuing buildup they've done of the Guild of Calamitous Intent. Yeah. Yeah, you know,
the supervillain license organization.
Yeah,
they did that. They just did this on Gotham too. Did you see that?
My wife is the Gotham fan in the house.
Oh, okay, all right. That's I guess it's a little bit of a spoiler, but the Penguin is now licensing supervillains, licensing crime in Gotham, which is horrible and brilliant.
Yes.
So is Gotham actually good? Because the initial reviews were kind of terrible.
Oh, I love Gotham.
Really? Okay.
I love Gotham to bits. Yeah, I mean, it's not all going to be the way that you would have done it or the way that you expected it, but they're doing a damn good job.
Okay, well, that's all I wanted to hear. Because, I mean, you would obviously have your own vision for how you would do it if someone put you in the director's chair, but I had heard the first season was just terrible, so I quit paying attention to it at that point.
I didn't think the first season was terrible.
Okay, all right.
It hardly had the recognizable DC characters in it yet, because the whole point of the series is to, like, lay the groundwork and build the whole thing from the ground up. So it was hardly even about them.
So what I can tell watching over my wife's shoulders, it's a show that goes down a lot better if you go in just saying, okay, this is Earth G. It's its own thing.
Sure. I agree with that.
Yeah, it's not going to be Christian Bale. It's not going to be Adam West. It's not going to be Frank Miller. It's just going to be its own thing, for better or worse.
For gosh sakes, I mean, their Bruce Wayne is this 13-year-old kid.
Yeah.
So it's totally not going to be any of those things.
Is it like Encyclopedia Brown, Dark Avenger?
I don't know that one.
Oh, you never read Encyclopedia Brown?
No.
It was these little mystery books when I was a kid, and you would read the 12-page story, and then you'd flip to the back and try to figure out who did it, and then flip to the
Hardy
back.
Boys. That was a Hardy Boys.
Yeah. All right, so is it Bruce Wayne Boy Detective?
No, not okay. No, it takes him a long time to, 3 seasons to even start caring about doing much of anything. Yeah. And it's much more about developing his early relationship with the character who becomes Catwoman eventually.
Okay. All right. Now, you would also recommend Arrow?
More or less. I mean, I watch all of those shows, right? And I mean, you can't. I think we all at this point need to be willing to think that these are separate universes, because otherwise you're just going to hate everything. So, which I don't think there's any advantage in that. But I'm a guy who, when Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a thing, always kept waiting, latching on to every little hint that Joss Whedon put in, that like Willow was going to eventually really master her witchcraft powers and be able to stand toe to toe with Buffy and fight vampires, and she's blasting away with her magic spells while Buffy's swinging her swords, and that Xander would he kind of remembered the military stuff from the Halloween episode, and he would turn into the paramilitary guy, and Oz would master his control of being a werewolf, and he'd be the guy who could wolf out, and they would turn into a little superhero team of 4 equally powerful characters. And they never went there. And
yeah, I was really hoping Oz was going to come back in exactly the way you just described, actually.
You what?
Oh, I had the same. I was hoping that Oz was going to come back at some point. But,
it seemed like an obvious way to go with that show, but instead he went a different direction. So, but that's, I guess I live a bit in my own fantasy world of where these shows might eventually go, which helps me to enjoy them more, and then only be disappointed at the end instead of at the beginning.
I think that's called headcanon.
Yeah.
Which is a great character name. You can have that for free, Jeff D.
Yeah.
You could sound less enthused.
That sounds a lot more like a Tick villain, but...
Oh, have you seen the new Tick?
Sure.
What'd you think?
I loved the Patrick Warburton Tick. I'm not a person who watched a lot of the animated Tick or read a lot of the Tick comics, which probably would have given me a different opinion of the Warburton take. I really disliked the pilot for the new series of the Tick, but I've now watched the whole first season and have to say that it's pretty good, and it's its own different thing.
Yeah, that's how I would describe it. I think the Warburton thing was pretty close to the source material, but I think he really wanted to spread his wings and do something different for this one. So
yeah. A lot of the stuff that they hinted at in their pilot that they were going to do with the show, they wound up not doing, and I think that was a good move.
The whole Arthur's really crazy and the Tick is just an imaginary friend.
Yeah.
Spoilers. Sorry.
And that costume, they changed the costume.
Yeah, a little bit.
So,
okay. Are you still reading comics these days, or not so much?
Not so much. I'm just too busy. A lot of my art I do with my knees up on sitting with my knees up on the sofa with the TV going, because for some reason that helps me get my work done. So that also helps me have enough time to watch all these stupid things.
So an Arrow, it's Stephen Arnell, right? Is Oliver Queen?
I'm sorry, what?
Yes, yes, that's the guy.
Stephen Arnell is Oliver Queen. Does he do a Christian Bale voice as Green Arrow?
Oh, they do some kind of voice change thing. I don't know if I'd call it Christian Bale. No, I wouldn't call it Christian Bale. Christian Bale's all like lispy as Batman. It just kind of troubled me, but
lispy. Okay, well, that's cool.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it.
Okay, cool. I have to give that a look. I started seeing a couple of previews of Arrow where I was like, is he doing a Christian Bale voice when he's throwing that punching glove arrow at that guy? But
I don't think so in particularly, but other people have a different take, I suppose.
Okay, I'll check that out. All right, well, I need to wrap it up and pick up the kid for daycare. Jeff, it's an honor to have you, sir. Anything else we want to mention before we wrap things up tonight?
Let me plug my Patreon.
Okay.
It's Art of Jeff D, all one word, on Patreon if people want to support my artwork. And the Monkey House Games site, where you can click the shop link to find all the stuff that we've done, is monkeyhousegames.com. And my other company that does Cave Master and Bathorm and all the other things I've done over there is unigames.us.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Chris, anything else you want to mention before we wrap up tonight?
Well, if anybody's got $4 burning a hole in their pocket, those copies of World Defenders This Summit are still available at your favorite PDF outlet, and me and my mini dogs and wife would surely appreciate you checking that out.
That was World Defenders The Summit, and that's through Fandango Games, which is my personal imprint. So check it out now.
Hey.
So, all right, thanks again, Jeff, and to our listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the BAMF Podcast.
Bye, everybody.